Thank you very much indeed, and welcome to the second session. Um, this session is about Malaysia's economic outlook for this year and beyond, with some of the challenges ahead, such as inflation, such as supply chain security, and shortages in labor, food, and various other items. We have with us three very distinguished panelists. I just learned that each of them have been famous in media for various very good reasons. We have Datuk Yogeesvaran, who is former Deputy Director General of our Economic Planning Unit in the Prime Minister's Department. We have Mr. Manokaran Mottain, who is the Director in Malaysia Venture Capital Management, former Chief Economist, Alliance Bank, and various consultancies. And then we also have Associate Professor Dr. Ahmed Razman bin Abdul Latiff, who is an Associate Professor at Putra Business School. My name is Isan O, and some of you might know me as a Senior Fellow at the Singapore Institute of International Affairs and Senior Advisor to the organizer KSI. One of the organizers. So we will have more of a conversation style, almost like a dialogue. So I would toss a number of questions to our panelists. They will take their turns in answering them. Towards the end, of course, we also welcome questions from the floor. Hopefully, if you have some questions, you could direct them to our panelists. Before I ask your questions, of course, briefly introduce yourselves. Now, my first question is, after listening to our previous speakers, including keynote speakers, I'm wondering, is economic recovery really on the horizon? Are we really seeing economic recovery? Because we heard of very rosy numbers from month to month, but we also heard of sad stories of closing down, winding up from week to week, if not day to day. So what's going on here? And is there some sort of what I would call dissolute dissonance, a gapping gap between the macroscopic trend, rather rosy one, and the microscopic business-scape, the everyday livelihood of our common folks? Is there such a big gap in between? So I think I will throw this question first to Datuk Yogesh, and then followed by Mr. Mano, and then by Professor Ahmed. Yeah, Dr. Yogesh, please.
Good morning to everyone, and first let me start by thanking KSI for inviting us to this forum, and also like to thank Dr. Hui-san for his question. As always, very intriguing questions. I think this morning we have been here for the last 2 to 3 hours, and we have heard a lot of things about the economy, even in the opening speech, and also in the Deputy Minister's speech, where he laid out what is happening with the economy, with all the figures, and a lot of figures has been thrown at you, statistics has been thrown at you. I'm not going to stretch you again with those kind of statistics, but let me just say that I think the statistics speak for themselves. Certainly, we have seen that growth has set in. We saw that firming up in the last quarter of last year when we recorded 3.5% GDP, and in the first quarter of 2022, we have also seen some handsome or appealing growth rate of 5%. And as we know, all that's been backed by improvement in domestic demand, private consumption, public investment, public consumption, as well as also supported by the external sector. These figures cannot be disputed. And we are seeing this recovery. But of course, also in the horizon, as Dr. Wee alluded to, we cannot assume that this is going to continue because we've got some real risks just in front of us. As previous speakers also mentioned, that we have never been in a time where we were faced with so many risks at the same time. And just to allude to the risk we talked to you this morning is the fiscal tightening which is happening, starting with the US, the increasing interest rates. Then we have the inflation in front of us. Then we have the geopolitical risk coming from Russia and Ukraine. So these are real dangers which we talk about. And while we are not seeing the real impact of these events, it's already beginning to show up in the economy. Yeah? It's already beginning to show up in terms of supply constraints, in terms of food supply and other commodity, and also increase in commodity prices. So if you want to see continued growth, continued recovery, a lot of things has been done. And the Deputy Finance Minister actually laid out a comprehensive set of measures which the government wishes to undertake. I think we are hearing very nice sound bites and very appealing sound bites, but the reality is having to do all that, having to realize all these measures which you talk about. In my view, we have some real constraints which if we do not address in the short and immediate term, the recovery will be impeded. First, as we always heard about, the one silver lining or two silver linings which we have is the, you see, we talk about most important change is taking place is opening of our borders. Therefore, there's a real possibility of us having some benefits arising from the services sector, particularly tourism. But along with it, we have to handle a lot of things, a lot of challenges domestically. If it's not done, I think we can quite daringly say that this process of recovery can be hampered or subdued. The first, I think, for me, utmost is governance. Utmost is governance. If we talk about governance, we talk about transparency, we talk about the level of corruption, perception, whether real or perception. I think it's very, very important. This is very, very important if you want to draw in not only domestic investors, but even most importantly, foreign investors. If you look at FDI figures of late, there's some improvement, but we note that even the last UNCTAD report on the world investment, the largest, about almost 80% of those total investments came to ASEAN. It went to Singapore, Indonesia, and Vietnam. We only got a single-digit portion of the total investment. What does it say for ourselves? Of course, we have heard about the new or national aspiration for investment, national investment aspirations. But a lot of things has to be realized. We are losing ground with other regional economies as far as attracting FDI is concerned. FDI is very, very important. As you know, a lot of growth in Malaysia over the last 20, 30 years has to be attributed to FDI, the MNCs, in terms of venturing into new industries. For example, E&E was basically MNC-driven, FDI-driven. In the same way, if we want to move to the next level of development, it has to be foreign direct investments besides domestic investments. So getting our act right is very important. Beyond that, we also have to look at a very important factor, which is which very often, in fact, I would say that nobody mentioned that, unless I missed it in the last round a couple of minutes ago, is the elephant in the room, political stability. If we don't have the political stability, we are going to lose recovery. There has to be, political stability is very related to coherence and consistency of policy. If you have policies changing every day, every week, we're not going to see recovery. So political stability is very important. Policy consistency and coherence, very, very important. And the other issue I would like to talk about is having a long-term vision. We talk about today the immediate issues which are at hand, but we always have to keep our eye in the medium-term goals and the long-term goals of the country. We talked about, many speakers raised the issue of structural issues, and there are so many, we are inundated with so many structural issues, right from foreign labor, right from infrastructure, right from our regulatory framework, our tax system, incentive system. There's so many of them. If we do not address them, we are going to be in trouble. We are going to be in trouble. They are real issues and need to be handled. I come from a planning unit, and always I will adhere to the point of having a plan. Having a plan in hand. Of course, Malaysia is full of plans. I will also hit myself and sometimes say, why are you talking about planning? Just get the job done. But you need to plan. There's so many things at hand here. We need to plan. What Malaysia is today missing, I would say, is a vision like Vision 2020. Whatever said and done is a vision for 30 years, where everyone came together. Fortunately, at that time, when it's devolved, there was only a single party ruling the country. But today, political landscape is very different. Very different. We have had 3 prime ministers within the span of very short time. That's how volatile our political environment is. In this situation, we need to have a vision. We need to have a plan which is endorsed by almost every segment of society. It has to be a plan which is bipartisan, which is not disorientated or put aside by any other political party which comes in. We need to have a vision to take us through beyond just this particular recovery which you're talking about. I think I'll stop at that and I can go on to elaborate further. Thank you so much. Dr. Wee is already looking at me.
Thank you, Datuk Yogesh, for highlighting the importance of opening our borders, of governance, of the role played by FDI, as well as political stability. And most of all, we need to have a bipartisan long-term vision. Our next speaker would be Mr. Mohan, Mr. Mano. And I understand he has some PowerPoints prepared. So if our audiovisual people could put up Mr. Mano's PowerPoint. Yeah. Is it here? Oh, okay. Yeah. You can either stand or sit, or you want to use the podium, it's fine.
Yes, it's a wonderful event. Thank you very much, KSI, for inviting me. Although I am already retired from the banking line, it's really a privilege to meet you all at this wonderful event. Okay, Dr. O has mentioned just now that there are some rosy pictures, okay, and you can see why he said rosy, because of the last quarterly growth of 5%. The economy grew by 5%, okay, but if we, each and every one of us in the room will say, are we feeling the benefit or not, So that's the reason why people have more doubts on the figures. But I would say that it is indeed Dr. Yogesh has mentioned just now that border opening and all that. Yes, those things have benefited certain sectors in the economy. Like if you say wholesale, the tourism sector, services sector benefited, okay, because of the tourism, okay. And if you ask the other sectors like hotels, restaurants, all these sectors have benefited, okay, because of the border opening and also the traveling, as a result of border opening, okay. More travels have been done and those sectors. But if you ask me, what about the manufacturing sector? Manufacturing sector, beginning, yes, it started off very well, okay, registering some sharp gains and all that. But lately, you can see that every one of us are talking about, I don't have labor to continue my business. So where is the fault? This is what we have to understand. Okay, because of labor supply, and also after started the year well, suddenly we came across the war. Okay, Ukraine war. Ukraine and the Russian war has sort of like dented the hopes of a strong recovery in major economies. like China, US, and all that. Okay, so those, if you, okay, and on top of it, also we see US economy experiencing some, sharp increases in the economy. I mean, in the inflation numbers. So as a result of that, the FOMC has decided to raise interest rates. When they raise interest rates in the last round, 50 basis points, and another one is coming soon in a couple of days, this week, okay, another 75 basis points possibly, and we may finish the year between 3 to 4% of the interest rate. Rising interest rate, is it good or not? You know, it makes your loans expensive, and as a result, you can expect manufacturing sector to sort of like, reduce the momentum of growth. When the US raised interest rates, BNM also following. Okay, that's recently they have done 25 basis points. After this, maybe, yeah, in my opinion, is the next one will come around September. Okay, so this year, interest rate will go back to 2.25% towards the end of the year. So these numbers are, good for manufacturing as well as for other loans. When consumers start paying a higher amount, it sort of like take off their disposable income. When you have lows, low disposable income, so you tend to spend less. On top of that, you have another. This is I have talked already about the reducing economic momentum in the major economies in the world will tend to slow down the recovery momentum in other economies. Okay, and China is also affected. Okay, I wanted to talk about this rising inflation risk. Okay, what is happening now? Why? Okay, central bank or why the US want to raise interest rates? Because they fear that if they don't do it, is going to up the inflation risk. Okay, so in this case you must understand one thing: inflation is not caused by demand, it is caused by raw materials and all that. Cost push inflation is happening now. So you can raise interest rates how many times, the effectiveness of controlling the inflation is not that effective. I would say in an economy when the demand is increasing and all that, then you increase your interest rate. Interest rate will cut your disposable income, and then people tend to spend less. Then the inflation can come down. But in this case, if you in my opinion, if you raise interest rate, inflation is caused by fuel prices or supply chain in the raw materials and all that. I don't think it will be effective. So I hope the central bank is mindful of when come to raise interest rates in the coming months. Okay, so because we are totally different scenario at the moment. Okay, the last one is ringgit. Okay, the manufacturers are complaining that, not only they have the supply bottlenecks as a result of the war, but they also have, they are paying the cost for raw materials with really very high cost because of the ringgit depreciation. Ringgit has depreciated in the charts. You can see ringgit has depreciated a lot, compared to the rest of the currencies. Okay, why? Okay, we are not in a war or anything like that, but we do have some outflow of currency. I mean, sorry to say this is the a real thing that we are facing now. Outflow has been excessive. Okay, not only the portfolio managers are taking out the money because they see less prospect of recovery in Malaysia compared to the US. Okay, why our portfolio managers they change their mind immediately is because down there in the US is a prospect of rising in interest rates. Okay, one, and you also can see rising growth there, although it is reduced slightly. But compared to Malaysia, okay, you don't have, I mean, when you compare US and Malaysia, they are more towards, all the foreign fund managers more towards the US. Okay, you can't help it. You want to help your own country than helping other country, right? Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is, if you ask me, this is a very painful. I don't know whether to say it out or not here. Okay, be it in these four walls, a lot of people, our people, also taking out money. Okay, I don't have to say who. There are a lot of outflows individually going to Singapore, the nearest, and going to other countries also. Okay, so if certain things is we need to really address the cost. Yesterday also somebody from the Sun called me up and asked me whether income subsidy is better or price subsidy is better. Income subsidy means is giving payment and all that, to the people. That is income subsidy. Price subsidy is to subsidize, giving subsidies to the pump prices and all that, make it lower and all that. I would say that, we have to be very careful about this. The root cause of inflation is not all this, okay? The root cause is actually in Malaysia. I'm talking about Malaysia. Why food prices, we are facing crisis. Why chicken has gone up by 13 ringgit per kilo at the highest. I don't know after that has gone up further or not. But 13 is one of the highest I've seen. Okay. Why? Because of the so-called middleman. We have been talking about middleman, orang tengah. We want to remove them and all that. But it has been some 10 to 20 years. When I was in Bank Negara in 1980s, we did a lot of papers. Okay? But the government was not comfortable, to exercise those things. You must understand is at the end of the day, who are the middlemen? Are the main politicians. Do you think the politicians going to vote for, to remove the middlemen? In 1980s, why we came out with a farmer? Because we wanted to remove the middleman. But why we cannot do? Because farmer is ineffective. Okay? If you ask me the price increase and all that, the petani, the farmers, farmers are benefiting from the price increase. No way. Whatever they get from the farmers is about, I would say about 4 ringgit, 3 ringgit, 4 ringgit, like that. And then whatever they distribute to the markets, retailers, maybe about 10, 11 ringgit. So, at 13 ringgit, the retailer at the market is trying to earn his money, to, cover his costs and all that. But people don't understand. Okay, the government say, okay, why is this price increase? Okay, let's go for enforcement activities. Where you are going for enforcement, you are going to the retailer, the poor market fella. Why are you selling at 13 ringgit and all that? Yeah, you are doing your enforcement at the wrong, you're barking at the wrong tree. Okay, so these are some of the weaknesses that we have got in our system. If all this can be, I don't want to be tapped totally, but at least.
I think, yeah, need to wrap it up. Yeah.
Okay, at least we can reduce it. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Yep. So, Mr. Mano talked about services having a good time, manufacturing not so good. The war in Ukraine also has a denting effect. Interest rate hike may not be the best solution to tame inflation. And then we also have a big problem with a weakening the ringgit. And Mr. Mano even went into my second question already about inflation. So I think the second question then I would ask the other two panelists to cover, since you already did so substantially. But before that, Professor Ahmed, would you have anything to add? Why is there such a rosy picture, but then all our friends, well, not all, most of our friends seem to be not doing so well?
Okay, thank you, Dr. O and KSI for inviting me and putting me in the third speaker, so that most of the things that need to be said already been spoken by these two, and I can just say I agree with both. But at the risk of losing this free gift, I think I probably have to share something else. So, well, I do agree that there seems a bit of dissonance between what happened at the macro level and the micro. Last week, I've been invited to give talk in one of the live TV show, the Biz Malaysia by TV1. And before the live interview, the topics on, again, the same topic here, Malaysian economic recovery. And she asked me, so it's, what's the economic outlook? Is everything okay? So I've been telling her all those positive numbers. And her response was, are you sure? Really? And I said, I thought we were supposed to say all the positive thing in the national news. So, but then that's the reality that I face on a day-to-day basis. The people on the ground, the common people, they do not actually understand what we have been talking about. Mr. Mano, if you're showing this graph to the people on the street, their eyes turn watery. But what they really experience is the rising prices, the stagnating salary, and all the difficulties in getting the right kind of job. If you look around, there are lots of vacancy, but there are lots of mismatch of skills there. But the thing that we can see from the statistic that can paint the real picture, 2 years ago, the average salary has decreased by 9%. But if you look into the median, it's 15.6%. So that's the reality. And when we're talking about the spending of B40 especially, majority of the expenditure actually on food. So when the food prices went up, so they already spent most of their income. And when we talk about the fact that the poor getting poorer and the rich getting richer, that's the reality. Forbes highlighted the top 100 wealthiest person in Malaysia actually increase in experience of actually increase their wealth by 14%. And I look into the statistic, the sales of BMW and Mercedes also back to the pre-pandemic level, Datuk. So I don't know why I'm referring Mercedes to you, but that's the reality. The gap is increasing. And one interesting note or something that people, I don't know, didn't highlight during the debate between Najib and Anwar, Najib highlighted something about Gini coefficient, the inequality, and the number he claimed to be going down during his time. So that got me curious because recently there's lots of talk about the reintroduction of GST, whether this is going to be a boon or bane for the people and the nation. In fact, I gave so many comments on GST. One of the comment become viral, not the one that I really want to highlight, but the antara rasuah dan GST, between corruption and GST. Please don't Google it. Or please do, okay, if you want to get entertained. And but during the session, the interview session, I highlighted the fact that yes, the Gini coefficient went down during his time, but from 2016 to 2019, this is the time when the government introduced GST from 2015 to 2018. So the government managed to collect the latest one in 2017 was about close to 45 billion. The Gini coefficient actually increased. Increase means there's a wider inequality. So that doesn't make sense. How can you been collecting lots of billions of income, and yet there's a widening inequality there? So that's probably fit into the theory that it's also about allocating or distributing the wealth that you receive to the deserved portion of or the group that deserve it. So what happened is that we are talking about the transparency, the accountability, the distribution of wealth among the people. When we look into the latest DOSM, which Mr. Manu has been quoting many data from that, and we look into the latest census data, we are still addressing the fact that there are many abject poverty, in hardcore poverty in the country. And when talking about the Gini, it is real. Urban inequality is higher than the rural, and among the ethnicity also, there's a quite contrast. Although the Bumi Putra has been reducing, but the rest actually increasing. So when talking about is there any dissonance, that's, I do agree, and this is something that need to be addressed. People on the ground, they didn't really concerned about whether we get the GDP. I don't know whether they even know what GDP is, but what they really care, why my salary has been stagnating or decreasing, why the prices getting increasing and what is really the future for us, for all of us. And this has already been addressed by the previous two speakers. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Professor Ahmed. He talked about the rising prices and the fact that the salary, unfortunately, is still stagnating, making that a lot of, especially our B40 brothers and sisters, could not afford food and various other items. We have a widening GDP, although, for example, the revenues of the government going up and so on. I think I do know why you asked me about, why you referred to me about Mercedes-Benz and so on. I think it's probably because in Sabah, we do have a lot of Mercedes-Benz among the more well-to-do communities. But unfortunately, we also have some of the poorest districts and communities around the whole country, right? So it is exactly as you pointed out, this rising Gini coefficient, which is troubling a lot of us. Now I'm gonna throw my second question, but right after that, I would like to invite questions from the floor, right? Because this is supposed to be a dialogue. So I will throw my second question, namely, I think the hot keyword of the day is inflation. What are the root causes of inflation? Are we doing it right? Are we doing it enough to tackle inflation, besides raising interest rates and putting price caps on essential goods, or as my friend Mano put it so eloquently, besides cutting out, hopefully cutting out, not very successfully, the middleman, right? Or the middle persons. Are we doing it right in tackling inflation? And will consumer spending keep up with rising prices? Again, I refer to Datuk Yogesh.
Thank you, Doctor. I think we have spoken quite a bit about inflation. Both the other speakers alluded quite a bit on inflation, but let me just provide my comments. If you ask me the question of whether we are on the right path in terms of addressing inflation, I would say the short-term measures taken are inevitable, and they are good measures. Very important because we find that inflation is disproportionately affecting those who are poor. The B40 is most affected. If you look at their expenditure pattern, about 30 or 40% of the income is spent on food, or even much more than that. So we have to ensure, and essential items like transport and housing. So these are the items, big ticket items, which are actually seeing increases in prices, massive increase in prices. If you talk about general inflation, it's about 2.3%. But if you talk about food inflation alone, is about 4.1%. So you know where the prices are actually increasing. So the steps taken by the government in terms of subsidies, fuel subsidies, as well as food subsidies for the moment, for me, are good steps. But my caveat is this cannot go on forever. These are real good short-term measures. But in the medium and longer term, the government has to start working on some constructive measures to actually address inflation. Because at least for this year and next year, we're going to see inflationary pressure coming mostly from cost push, as Mr. Mano mentioned. It's mainly cost push, and we're going to see a lot of imported inflation, and the impact is going to be greater on us with depreciating ringgit. So this is something we have to address. Some things we have to do in the medium term certainly is, which we have talked about many times this morning also, is to go for targeted subsidies. If we talk about targeted subsidies, we're basically talking about for fuel and cooking oil and other food items, where we find that subsidies are there for everyone. Many people who do not deserve the subsidies are getting the subsidies. For example, RON 95 is disproportionately benefiting those people in the middle income and the higher income who actually can afford. So the government has to very fast work on targeted subsidies, and this is not something new. While I was in the government, we're already working on the targeted subsidies, and there are many ways which are already on the table. It just needs to be implemented. Whether there's a commitment and a political commitment to implement it immediately and as soon as possible. That's very important, so that at least the money which is used for these subsidies can be diverted to do social impact projects which will actually help the welfare and the cost of living and the living standards of those who really, the B40 and even the lower M40. That's very important. And beyond subsidies per se, what we need to do also is to address some structural issues. We talk about food as being very important, food security as being very important. You note that I read an article, I'm just quoting it, I'm not sure how true it is. It says like Singapore has 6 months of contingency supply of food, whereas Malaysia is only 3 months to able to sustain food. I mean, this is, I would say it's shocking, but this is something which you have to learn from. Many of us don't like the word Singapore, but sad to say, but there are many things we can take a leaf from. So these are things we have to look at. And today we talk about food security. Food security is not only, when we talk about food security, we immediately talk about self-sufficiency. But it's not self-sufficiency alone. If you have a look at, I was just looking at, there's a food self-sufficiency index, General Food Security Index. This is by Economist, Economist Impact. They look at things like affordability, availability, quality and safety, as well as natural resources and resilience, and even resilience to climate change. So it's a holistic approach to looking at national food security, rather than we always just focus on SSL, self-sufficiency targets, but it's much beyond that. So, and this is something structural, and as we know, Malaysia has moved away from being an agrarian economy in the 80s, in the 70s. We are a major agrarian economy. Almost 20% of our economy came from agriculture, but today as things have changed, now it's single-digit contribution. But in absolute terms, it has not reduced. We may have to revisit our agro policy in terms of focusing more on food. And here again, I would say that whenever we have a policy change, do not have the government involved. Do not have the government to intervene, getting GLCs to go into this business of production, GLSIs to go into production, but I think it should be more private sector driven. The government should facilitate. Yeah, if you go back to history, when I was also in the agriculture ministry, and many of the things which you want to do will not take place basically because we look at viability of projects. We talk about today about food for poultry, is mostly, we talk about corn, sorghum, we talk about even PKC, palm kernel cake. These are things which have been recycled and recycled, and we talk about it again. Because the point at the time was, we found it is not economically viable for us to produce these things, so we imported. But today, if you want to have a policy, then you don't talk about economic viability. I mean, the policy change has to be different. That means the government should come on board to subsidize certain aspects. But here again, let it not be GLCs driving it or GLICs driving it, but it should be open to the private sector as a whole, being a more efficient agent of delivery. I'll stop at that.
Thank you, Datuk Yogesh, talk about the need for targeted subsidies, social impact projects. I would like to add on this. In Sabah nowadays, there are people setting up these so-called social enterprises. For example, mobilizing some of the disadvantaged rural communities to use their local materials, raw materials. I will give you an example, like for example, the husk of corn, a corn husk, or as we say in Malay, kulit jagung, usually just thrown away. But during the latest Mother's Day, I saw some social entrepreneurs, they mobilized the rural communities to use this corn husk to make the artificial carnations, shall we say, for Mother's Day in order to make some money for this far away disadvantaged communities. So I think sometimes it's also private sector driven. Datuk Yogesh also started to go into shortages, the fact that we need a holistic approach and we must balance between resilience and economic viability of food crops, for example. So I might as well combine these two questions. My original question was inflation, right? Let's also go into shortages. We have food shortages, we have labor shortages, a lot of raw material shortages. I also want to know what are the root causes. So inflation and shortages, what are the root causes? Are we doing the right thing to tackle them? Are we doing enough besides banning exports and so on? And whether the government can do more or the private sector can do more. So Professor Ahmed and also Mr. Mano will answer this. Inflation and shortages. Professor Ahmed.
Okay, thank you for the question. Basically, when things like this happen out there, affecting the nation and the community, we always want to look into the root cause. And similarly, in my role, I'm trying to understand how we can address this, probably not necessarily using the try and test method, but trying to figure out, can we think a little bit out of box, or looking into something that has yet to be reintroduced in the society for at the moment. I'm in one of the NGO. I'm the vice chairman of Movement of Monetary Justice, Malaysia. We want to use the word Avengers, but somehow the name has been taken. So it's a movement for monetary justice. For us, we fight for the reform of monetary system. We are part of the international movement on monetary reform, and we're trying to come up with the alternative solution for what's happening now. Because Albert Einstein one of the quotation by Albert Einstein, doing the same thing again and again, expecting a different results, is insanity. So is it enough? Just simply raising interest rate, putting price cap? It seems that it's a textbook measures, and whether it really address the fact that we are experiencing higher and higher prices every year. we talk about inflation rate 2.3 in the last month, but people were asking how come US is 8.3, even Singapore is 5.4, the highest for the past 8 to 10 years, and Malaysia only 2.3. And when we look into the food and beverages index, it's about 4.1%. But when we look into the base year, 2010, it's actually increased more than 30%. And we never seen this going to be decreasing anytime soon. So we are losing this purchasing power for our money. So I even, to the extent, visited Dosem, Datuk Sri Uze. I asked Datuk, when are we going to review the calculation of our CPI? Because we have been using the same basket of product services, about 470, and each of these items got this weightage. So those who are volatile in prices, they cap it, so it's not going to affect so much. So we cannot control it so much so that people don't believe in the figure anymore. Okay, because people don't believe that the inflation rate is only 2.3%. And if it's low, why Bank Negara increase the OPR? Okay, because OPR normally you raise it when the interest rate is high. So that's one thing, to address the actual inflation figure, then we can do the right measure. But of course, when the food prices getting high, when people can afford it, then we have the situation. There will be less activity of transferring of product and services between each other. So what's the solution? Is it possible to increase the liquidity by injecting more fiscal stimulus kind of package, or inject the credit like what we have done before during the pandemic? And people talking about, oh well, this not necessarily will help the situation. It might even make the inflation go higher. But there is actually a solution beyond that, meaning when we are in this NGO, Movement for Monetary Justice, when certain community have the product, have the services to offer, but simply don't have the money, they come up with their alternative currency called community currency. And we also talk about the possibility of government, because government have to figure out how to find enough revenue to give up as a monetary assistance. But why not we consider the netting system? You're using a credit or voucher kind of method to substitute the money with something that equivalent to it. And when we're talking about the opportunity that what's happening right now, this is at international level for our NGO. We've been talking about the introduction of CBDC. The Bank Negara has been talking about it and having a discussion with several countries, Project Damba, with Singapore, Australia, and South Africa, into introducing the blockchain-based sovereign money to facilitate the trade between these countries. But what if this new type of sovereign money based on this technology can be used to make sure that the people get enough financial assistance, where they can even observe where the money is spent, in which sector, and the trend, and also who actually can benefit from it. So this is all this situation that we can think of, thinking out of the box, rather than just simply hoping that the things that we keep doing again and again will finally give different results. I wish that more and more people start talking about the alternative. We cannot remain or dependent on the government kind of assistance, price capping, or removal of AP import, or subsidy to continue like this. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed, who mentioned the declining purchasing power and the need for alternative and out-of-the-box methods, such as community currency, such as a voucher system, and such as the possibility of virtual currency. Now, Mr. Mano, you talk about middlemen being the one to blame and so on. Anybody else to be blamed for inflation and shortages?
Talking about inflation and shortages, okay, there's another party also you can blame them. Is the policymakers. I'm very open, because If you ask me, last year I wouldn't be this open because last year I was working in a bank, so I have to care for their licenses. But now I don't care, okay? So I can be open to tell you all the truth. Okay, why I say policymakers? Uh, policymakers, they are very fast, would say, changing, always change their policies. Okay, halfway through the game, they say they stop the game and they change the policy. That kind of thing. Okay, I would say that in the 1980s, I'm bringing you all back, and some of you may not have born also. Have you heard about Green Book system? Rancangan Buku Hijau. Okay, at that time I was in the estate, so I was one of the guys who went and participated in the Green Book. The estate, they gave us a plot of land where you can farm something, okay, or even rearing cattle is allowed, those days under Tun Razak's time. But now you can't do all that, okay? So now the thing is that in order to address the food crisis, come on, Malaysia is full of land. Singapore is such a small island. If they can have 6 months ready supply, why are we talking about 3 months only? We can have more than that. Each time we come out with, when we face crisis period, so many task force formed, planning done, okay, like what Dr. Yogesh mentioned, okay, planning is, we have got all kind of planning, but the thing is that execution problem there, implementation problem there, okay. We are more interested in politics rather than really helping out the poor people, B40. Talking only B40, but the heart, I think, I don't know how many of them are really want to help the B40 people. So I would say that bring back the Buku Hijau. I've been talking to the press last few days who have been talking to me. I tell them the only way to address the crisis, food crisis in Malaysia, is to encourage people to, do a second job. Those days you say second job means is go and take up some small petty trading business and all that. No, it can even be, you can do farming at home. So you will ask me, what about those people like me? We are coming from the city. What are we going to do? You can do that. Planting is very easy, even inside inside a room also it is possible. I told them, to the press, there are so many abandoned government buildings. Give it to the people. They can do. I am part of Wisma Harapan, SAMH, Selangor and Belayar Persekutuan Association of Mentally Retarded. I am the Deputy Secretary General there, and we have done some hydroponic farming. And within, it is so encouraging. Within 30 days, you can harvest, like, mushroom. Within a classroom, we use the classroom to, to do all that. We can harvest. And then the other day, last weekend, my team was putting up, that they harvested about 16 kilos of chili, chili padi. See, these are the things that are going, where, heavily sought after. Why not we be part of the system? We can sort of like, and then those out of the city areas, semi-rural or semi-urban areas, government can give those land under the LLN, now they call it Tenaga, the power cables. Yes, they are doing. Not everywhere they are doing. Okay, so you must come out during the COVID time. The Belia Persekutuan Ministry came out and say anybody, for that matter, can establish a roadside stall. You don't need approval or you don't need permit and all that. Likewise, the government can always say that, okay, if you can identify an empty land, if you want to farm, you go ahead, no problem. As long as you don't disturb the power lines. Why not do you give this kind of thing? Then you can create more supply of vegetables or even cattle rearing allowed, you can create more. And here you are saying that, okay, recently they came out, the government policy, talking about government policy, they came out with you don't need AP to import food, right? Okay, okay, you try, go and import some chicken from Thailand and see, you see, you will face what kind of problem. You think that, oh, no AP, no more. Okay, we just import and we supply to the pasar. It's not that easy. There are other agencies are coming after you. Okay, is it halal or not? These are the few things. They need a coordinated policy announcement. Okay, all agencies must say, okay, no AP, and you can come out with the import. Suddenly, you can control the chicken price. I don't know. Chicken price. If you ask me again, the middleman is the first is killing the farmers.
Thank you.
Okay, with that,
Thank you.
I finish.
So Mr. Mano is now blaming the policy makers as well for the inconsistent policies. And then the need to bring back the Green Book for people to have second jobs, such as doing urban and also rural farming. The government can provide land for that purpose and so on. All these are very innovative and alternative approaches. Now, now I would open the floor to welcome questions. Please come to your nearest microphone, briefly identify yourselves, and briefly ask your question, please. There are two online questions here, but I think they have to do with, one is about price control, the other is about subsidies, but I think the speakers already sort of answered that namely, these are short-term measures which are necessary, but perhaps in the long term, you need the more creative approaches as mentioned by them. Now, there is one question, right? Yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Usha. I'm from the human resources space. I would like to ask about labor productivity. I know that it takes time for structural transformation or to reform, but what are the low-hanging fruits regarding labor productivity as far as can we improve it in the context of me as a layman, what can I do? And two, me as an employer in the private sector, what are the low-hanging fruits that I can implement to improve, to help improve the overall labor productivity? Back to you.
Thank you. Labor productivity. Can I have one or two more questions? And then we will ask the panelists to answer. So labor productivity. Anything else? How do we improve labor productivity? Please just come to the microphone if you have questions. The lady in red, right? Yeah. Oh, sorry, there's an. Because before the lady in red, there's another one at the
Sorry
back there.
to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's not red actually, it's dark orange, but it's okay.
Oh, it's orange.
Oh,
From
sorry,
there is
I
very
didn't
good.
wear my glasses.
Yeah. it seems that I need to change my spectacle. I see it.
Yeah.
My name is Razman. I'm from Syrian Berhad. For the past since this morning until now, we've been hearing quite a scary stories, right? Quite a scary stories, okay, about this and that, and this and that, and this and that. And I really like Dr. Ahmed say, and we've been hearing about here and there, policy maker problem here and there, chicken price, food security and so on. Okay, enough food by the way. Now, I just want to ask a very plain question. Most of us here might know what is happening in this country, or at least 10 or 20%, because we know and we actually been exposed to the data and information. But the most important thing now, if we minus all of us here, we have maybe about 70 or 80% of our population is actually in the dark. What is happening in this country? And now it's our duty, maybe if we want to, how we actually want to revive our economy. Of course, we have to work together because the title of this actually Economic Outlook for 2022. So what will be the 2023 and so on and so on. I do believe that all those panels in front of me now maybe have some kind of solution. Of course, we have so many various problems, but what will be the most important thing, but at least in the next 3 years, before we entering Rancangan Malaysia ke-13, another policy changing, I think so. Thank you.
Very nice. So labor productivity, and then in general, how to revive the economy. Yeah, please, the lady in dark orange. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting members of the diplomatic corps. I'm ambassador of Romania to Malaysia, and I'm looking with a lot of hope for Malaysia recovery post-pandemic. Now I will keep it short. It's a simple question. If you would like each and every of co-panelists to choose one goal for the current year, 2022, in order to have a specific impact and contribution to post-pandemic recovery in Malaysia, what would be your best wish in a very pragmatic way, of course? Thank you.
Oh, that's a wonderful question. So we have labor, thank you, labor productivity. We would ask panelists to choose one of the heartfelt items that should be urgently done in order to revive our economy. And if that could be tied into the other question, you know, how to in general revive the economy will be even better. So we start with perhaps you, Datuk Yogesh.
Thank you. Thank you for all the excellent questions. Since the moderator says you make a pick, and also I want to take it away from my other fellow speakers. I'll just look at the second question from Encik Kamarul Zaman. You're talking about how to revive the economy. I think we have mentioned quite a bit of things about how to go about reviving the economy. We have agreed that we're on the path of recovery, but this recovery is in a very precarious situation because of the challenges we spoke about. So therefore, if you talk about going forward, we have to look also, while tackling the immediate term issues, we have to tackle some very important structural issues which are plaguing Malaysia. First, I would look at is the investment ecosystem itself. We are losing out in terms of private investment. What is driving the economy is consumption. That's basically because we're talking about pent-up demand, but it's also a risk of losing out on consumption basically because of inflationary factors and not rising commensurate incomes. So therefore, the bringing back private sector to drive the economy is very, very important. Therefore, tackling the ecosystem for promoting private investment, domestic and foreign, is very, very critical as I see it. And along the same line, if you want to support that initiative, it's very important to tackle the prerequisites for our ecosystem. One is very importantly the human resource, the skill set. We can talk about attracting big firms. We talk about losing out to other countries. But very important is we have to be magnet to talent. No? Very important to magnet to talent. Today we are losing out in terms of talent. Somebody spoke about brain drain. No? You really have to turn it around. We are talking so much about foreign labor. We're not talking about expatriates. Expatriates have not much problem and they've been welcomed in the country and they are contributing to this country. The foreign labor is one aspect of it. But here we're talking about labor. I think very important to, while talk about foreign labor, we have to talk about the topic of retaining labor in this country, retaining skill in the country. Yeah? There's a massive drain. You have to look at what is it. We talk about root causes today as a very key word. No, what are the root causes? But that we're losing out. The massive brain drain. What do you do to arrest this brain drain? Is very important. That's actually you told me is an immediate step because there's a product which is there and we're losing it. While we work towards improving skill sets, takes about 3 or 4 years to actually get people on board with the skill sets. That is very important. So therefore, if you ask me recovery, I think I'll harp on the investment. And second thing is also on the external side. External side is also very important. How do you promote our Malaysia as an important trading nation? We're also losing out in terms of exports have gone up, but we have to really make Malaysia as an important trading nation. And of course, MITI has today unveiled the national trade blueprint. And I think the word blueprint is also becoming a very taboo word. But I think you can have a blueprint, but make sure it's implemented. That's very important. So beyond that, if you talk about recovery, as I mentioned, we have to sit down together and we have to actually carve out where the nation is going. The economy has to be reset. There has to be a reset, economic reset. We can't be doing the same. You mentioned you can't be doing the same and expecting different results. So it's a need. There's already a time now call for us to reset the economy. It's not doing about the same things. Many things may need to do the same, but they need a little bit of tweaking. And what do you do to take us to the next level of growth, next platform for growth? We actually have to be on a burning platform. You ask me, we are actually on a burning platform. If you don't do it, we are at the crossroads. If you don't do it, you are going to lose out. You're going to lose out. So we have to think about resetting the economy, and that is not easy, and that will actually require people coming together and seeing where we can take the nation next, to become more competitive and to actually, I would say, recatalyze growth. At point of time, we were interested in 9% growth, comfortable. Then we became to 7% growth, 6% growth. Now I think we are becoming comfortable with 4% growth. So we are actually growing below our potential as a developing nation. And while we do that, very importantly, we have to ensure that that's inclusiveness. Now, whatever we do, we have to be inclusive nation. The benefits, the prosperity of the nation has to be shared. We have to ensure that the B40 and no segment of society is left behind. I will just stop at that.
Thank you. The need to reset the economy, to bring it to the next level, to be inclusive, to stimulate consumption by facilitating the private sector, especially in terms of not having brain gain, but having brain gain and also retaining the brains and improving the brains. So, Professor Ahmed, so this also serves as our concluding remarks in the interest of time here.
All right, sure. And perhaps I can address each of these questions briefly. Well, when we're talking about labor productivity during this pandemic, there's actually opportunity to come up with the best way to increase the workers' productivity. I've been approached by several companies to look into how they can address the work flexibility, work from home, work-life balance. And they discovered that during this period of pandemic, some of the department, some of the workers tend to be more productive working away from the office. And is there any way to capitalize on it and to make it a more permanent features? And I do recognize that this is actually something that we can explore together as a workers or as an employers. One of my students who has small businesses dealing with trading and system provider, he told me that the majority of his workers work at home, and yet the revenue double during this pandemic and going to double again this year. So, so it's not. So this is something that worth looking at. Meaning, are we better? Actually, do we have actually a better way to become more productive? Not necessarily in the office. I think most of us experience this when the economic sector has opened up. We experience the something that we shouldn't be miss the traffic jam, and if we can work better at home, why not? And some company also exploring the 4 days working days as well, and all this should be part of the continuous improvement process within the organization. I do believe that people tend to be more productive if they are given more freedom to choose where they work from, and given the technology, the automation, the digitalization, things can become better. In fact, I've been conducting classes for the past 2.5 years. I'm not so sure who's occupying my office right now at the moment. I'm not looking forward to that. But so that doesn't stop me and the rest of you to figure out what's actually the best way to become more productive. And when we're talking about the question 2 and question 3 regarding what can we do for now and beyond, I think the real thing that we need to address now is the need to have political stability. Whether we like it or not, like Mr. Mano said, if we don't have a stable government, we cannot execute things. Just something that I would like to highlight here regarding the food security. We actually have a national agro-food policy, Dasar Agro Makanan 2.0, that was supposed to launch 2 years ago, but was delayed and only launched last year due to the political instability. And if you happen to read those 589 pages, there are already 77 action plan to address our food security. And we already highlighted the problem that we are facing. We only have enough beef and lamb for only for 30% of it. We have enough chicken and eggs, that's why we're exporting to Singapore. But and we utilize 70% of the land, but only contribute 3.5% to GDP and 4% of the labor force. So we already recognize the problem. We already have the action plan. Why we didn't execute them, or most of them? So if we have a stable government, so we can just simply proceed with the execution of it. We have automotive policy, national automotive policy 2019. We keep talking about all those investment goes to the Indonesia and Vietnam, but the policy actually consolidates something on higher value added, like the autonomous driving, rather than simply producing nickel, like lithium ion battery. So we have all this. If we can just simply focus on executing this, like what Datuk also said, then all this can be addressed. So that's actually my wish list lah. I hope Christmas come early that we have a very stable policymaker. We already have Wawasan Kemaruan Bersama 2030. We only have RMK 12. We already have all these policies being launched for the past few years. The only thing is just simply to do maybe a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of improvement given the current situation. But this is all we need to do, in my humble belief, that once we have somebody who committed to execute it for the next few years, then hopefully we are in the right path of recovery. Thank you.
Thank you. So for Professor Ahmed, we need to perhaps better capitalize the work from home practice, and also the need, his wish list is for political stability, such that all these wonderful policies could be dusted off and properly implemented. That's very nice. And my friend, Mr. Mano, you please conclude briefly.
I think I will go for the the wish list. Okay. My wish is actually to see the real Keluarga Malaysia. Okay? Not by name, but the heart, by heart also. The problem here now at the moment is you need the unity is very important. Both from the citizens, the people, and also unity needed on the politicians, like what Professor mentioned just now. Okay, you need to have the stability of the government. We don't, in addition to the stability of the government, okay, current government is always depending of what, when is the time these fellows are going to, withdraw their support and all that. I think we need to go through this even in the other coming election. G15 also most likely will be a government with nobody getting, absolute majority and all that. But again, I'm just hoping that, the stability will be there, and also hopefully, this is, I would say that is something that beyond our control. We hope that we get the right ministers, brains with brains lah, who can come out with some solid policies, and then we can talk about the policy document just now. Okay, he mentioned how many policies suggestion? 77 action plan. I put my money if at least 10 of them has been implemented. No way. I think at the end of the day, each time you want to implement something, you always see, will I get the support or not, that kind of thing. You don't need, I think that's why I say that we need the right ministers with the right qualification. Be it, doesn't matter whether that so-called he is coming from that party and all that. Why not? We have a unity government. You have been talking about it. Just give them and see whether Malaysia can transform or not. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I know I'm standing between you and lunch, but we started this panel with looking at the economic outlook of Malaysia, and we ended with a collective call for political stability and national unity, and above all, the importance of brains or skill sets and so on. So, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a tour de force, very thought-provoking, and I hope you will give my fellow panelists a round of applause. And once again, thank you very much.